One thing I did want to ask you about in regard to this era, Justinian, Belisarius, uh, both of their wives were very significant and important figures. But there was, and I'm not going to try to use the Latin term because I didn't take Latin and I don't want to get corrected by a professor again. So there was basically a term called restoration of the empire, and people talk about that as that was part of Justinian's plan. Can you talk about what that was? And we saw how it played itself out with the conquest of some of these territories. But how did that come about? I was always curious kind of what made Justinian do that because he always seemed like a guy who just had an endless number of ideas and plans going around in his head.
That's a great way to put it. Justinian is a very interesting and complex figure, and we're able to know a decent bit about what he was thinking because he was a voluminous lawgiver. So he's giving all these laws, and all of these laws that he issues, they come with prefaces to them. So, he'll write about his intention for the law and maybe a little bit about what's going on at the time. And so it gives us a window into not only how things are going for the Roman Empire, but how the emperor himself sees these things. So, we don't get to know him nearly as well as we get to know modern political figures. You know, just to go back to our example, the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant wrote this enormous autobiography of his life at the end of his life. I wish we had that kind of thing for most of these Roman rulers, and we don't. So we don't have that kind of detailed information. But for Justinian, we have decent information, at least as far as the ancient world goes. But even with this decent information, modern historians struggle to answer that question that you just asked me. Why did this happen? Did Justinian plan this? There are a lot of different interpretations of that. So, just briefly to give you a sense of the debate that goes on here, there is for many, many generations, a agreement that Justinian planned out carefully a restoration of the empire, a Roman restoration, and that this was always a part of his plan. From when he was a young man, he knew he was going to become emperor and restore the Roman Empire. And so he sort of set up a to-do list, like, build up the army, attack these people, retake these lands, attack these people, retake those lands, so on and
Go
so
to
forth.
Kroger, get gas, all those sorts of
Yeah,
things. Right.
yeah, yeah. It was, he was a planner, right? So that's the argument for many generations of scholarship. And then very, very recently in modern scholarship, we're talking within the last 30 years, there has been a growing pushback on this idea that Justinian planned out the restoration of the empire. So there are many modern scholars who think that he did not plan this at all, that he simply took advantage of circumstances as they appeared, and that this was really much more piecemeal than has previously been argued. So it wasn't part of a grand plan. It was something he sort of stumbled into as opportunities presented themselves. So that's obviously the polar opposite of the first interpretation. I tend to think that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle between these two uh, polar extremes. I find it hard to believe that Justinian allowed himself to stumble into a series of wars when he was such a careful planner in every other aspect of his career as we know it. But at the same time, I don't find it hard to believe that he hadn't fully planned out all of this, that he didn't have, a set dream for how this would work. And I'm sure he had contingencies and ways that he would pull out of things if they didn't work out as he planned to. I think the fact that the uh, conquest of the Vandals and the restoration of Roman authority in North Africa went so well encouraged him in the next step, which was attempting to do the same in Italy. If North Africa had not gone as well, I think Justinian would have pulled back and concentrated on other things for a while. So I don't think he was so single-mindedly fixated on this idea of restoration as maybe previous generations of scholars would have thought, but he also didn't do it all accidentally or just to, take advantage of a situation as some other scholars have thought. So this is the kind of debate that we historians have about these kinds of things.
And that the way that you explain that makes sense, because as I was reading your book, I was expecting from somebody whose knowledge of this era is based primarily on what I remember reading uh, from yeah, I'm trying to think when we would have first had a world history class, probably like fifth or sixth grade or something like that. And then through junior high, which is what I went to, and high school, and then some in college, as well as podcasts, this kind of idea of Justinian sitting in Constantinople trying to retake the empire was always in the back, the lost lands of the empire was always in the back of my mind. So I was reading your book and I was like, okay, well, when are we going to when is this whole grand plan going to come up? But now the way you've explained it makes sense. It does seem like maybe Justinian had this idea, but he wasn't going to be so reckless that he was just going to do it no matter what.